Good day, everybody, and welcome to episode 51 of Sparkles of Love Transmissions. My name is Ana-La-Rai, and here at Sparkles of Love, we bring through the newest information, processes, and tools and the highest vibrations to support you on your spiritual journey to help you get out of that struggle. So today our topic is spirituality and 3D actions. So I want to talk about it sort of in a metaphor, but also real life. And I'm happy to answer your questions at at the end, which here is still morning. So I'm going to share a story with you. Some of you might have heard it that happened to me a number of years ago. I was on my spiritual path. Was already in the space. I was able to hear my guides. And I was working at a local resort here on Vancouver Island. And I was the director of human resources. And the city that we lived in, or the town we lived in, was doing a big push for emergency preparedness. And as many of you know, we live on Vancouver Island, so we are in an earthquake zone and a tsunami zone, and we're on the west coast of Canada. So the city was doing that. And so in my job as an HR director, I was uh, having people come and do presentations on emergency preparedness, and there were booklets, and it was really helpful for people. And so every time this was happening, I kind of felt this little, nudge, nudge, nudge. And I was single at the time. I lived in a house alone with my dogs. And, we live on an island, a big island, but an island. And there's no bridges here. You have to come by ferry or fly. So we are in a more isolated situation, and we're in this earthquake, quake, and tsunami zone. So I wasn't sure. I went to the earthquake preparedness, emergency preparedness sessions, and thought, oh, I don't have most of that. And so my guides kept sort of dropping hints that I needed to have an emergency preparedness kit. So I said that night when I went to bed, I said, if this is really, if maybe I'm imagining this because all this is happening at work. If I really need to have one, then you need to give me a really clear sign. So when I asked for clear signs, boy, do I get them. The next morning I went to work, and the very first email I opened up was emergency preparedness, why it's so important. Excuse me. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I need to do this. So that payday, I went off to Canadian Tire, which is a sporting goods and a little bit of everything store, camping and sporting goods and car stuff. And I had my list from the preparedness, but the guides, I stood in front of it, and the guide said one of this, two of this, two of this. And I had my list, but I'd forgotten it at home. And so I started, but I couldn't afford on that paycheck to get everything. So I got started. And then 2 weeks later, I went again to get more of it because I financially I could only get a little bit at a time, and I got more. And then they said, well, now you need a toter, you need containers for this stuff. And so they sent me to Walmart, which was about half an hour away back then, and looking for a tote on wheels because I'm not going to be able to lift a heavy tote up. And so I'm looking, and there are no totes on wheels, none. And I'm standing in the store, and they say, look up. And I look up, and on the very top shelf was a tote with a lid and a lock on wheels and a handle. So I bought it. And then they said, get a suitcase. And I had an old suitcase. And so I got everything all these things they had told me I had to have, got it into my emergency preparedness kit now. And they said, okay, it needs to go, the suitcase in this cart must go in your car now. Because back then, wherever I was, my car was. If I was at work, I had my car. If I was at home, my car was there. If I was gone to a movie or gone shopping, I was single. My car was always with me. So I carried that emergency kit in my car. So there was no room for groceries or anything else for 6 months. 6 months. And one day they said, okay, you can take it out now. So they had shared with me that at that point in time, there was a high potential for an earthquake. It didn't never happened, or a tsunami. I never needed it, but I was deeply grateful. And so about 3 months ago now, Christian and I were talking with God. So back then I was single. This was a number of years ago because Christian and I have been married 6 years. It was before that. So that was probably 9 or 10 years ago that happened. And about 3 months ago, the guides gave us some things they wanted us to do. And one of the things was update the emergency preparedness kit. Back then, I had nothing for Christian in it. It was built for one person, one sleeping bag, one of this, one of that. And so they asked us to do that. And so this last week, before we head off to the Mexico gathering, we got, you want to finish this, you want to get this done. And so we had a few months before, we had emptied out all the old stuff that, the food that had expired and things we weren't going to use, or we rewashed things and did all that. But now was time to get this ready. And so Christian and I have been doing this over the last week now, setting it up for two, looking at what we need, because there was a lot of really good stuff in there, but we needed things for two. Um, and the reality is, we live on an island. You need to be prepared here. If you're evacuated, you need to be able to live on your own. That's just common sense, right? And it's hard when you start living in a big city, or we get so complacent because the grocery store is nearby and we drive everywhere, but you need to be prepared. And we have a really small car. So we did our emergency kit. We spent a ton more money, and not a ton. Let me rephrase that. We spent more money. We did spreadsheets. I've got them here, and we itemized everything, and we did categories, and we did, when do things expire? So how many items are there of everything if it's not one? And when do we have to rotate things out of the kit? And so the categories we did, just because I know some of you want to know this, is cooking and kitchen. Okay. And that is literally your dishes, your pots, your pans, your knives, Ziploc bags, lighters, a cutting board. What else do we have in here? Scissors and tongs and towel, like dish towel stuff to clean stuff up. And then we have one that's dog supplies. Any of you that have pets know you have to have that. And then we have one for toiletries. So, your hairbrush, your toothpaste, your um, deodorants, your hand sanitizers, the things you use, toilet paper, things you use. We have a miscellaneous category, which is crystals and cash. Okay. And then there's a list of clothing for me and a list of clothing for Christian. And then we have a category that we put in with games and journals. So if you're stuck somewhere and maybe you are in shelter, but there's nothing to do, none of your devices work, what are you going to do? So we have decks of cards and Sudoku books and our journals and a couple of different games and things like that. And then the big one is shelter and living. So this is where the tent goes, and the sleeping bags and the batteries and the um, bungee cords and towels and flashlights and chargers and candles and twine and all of the things, duct tape and gorilla tape and all the things, I also bought a little emergency box kit, multi-tool, you name it. And then there was the food list. And we were originally, when I did this, I put in lots of canned goods and stuff and things to cook. And we found a large ready kit. It has 56 meals in it, and its expiry date is 25 years. So you don't have to look at now. It's all pasta, which would not be my first choice. But hey, who's picky when things are hitting the the fan, so to speak, when things aren't working well? So the other thing that we created is we did a last minute grab and go kit. So here in Canada, one of the things they say is you should have a list that if you have to leave your house in less than 15 minutes, this is what you grab. And if you've got 2 hours or an hour, this is what you grab. So we have all this ready no matter how much time we have. And then we have a list inside a couple of cupboards and downstairs are what are our last minute things. So passports, computers, phones, winter coats and extra shoes, the dog collars, those kinds of things, maybe some fresh food out of the fridge, the last minute things that you'll have time to grab. And Christian even did pack the car. Is it all going to fit? Do both totes fit in the car? And, are we going to get the dogs in the back with what else we need in there? So it's been an interesting process. And I have to tell you that during part of it, lots of fear came up. It's like, wow, if the guides are saying that we need this, it made me a little bit trepidatious. It brought up a little bit of trepidation. And I'm like, okay, no, last time nothing happened, but they wanted us to be prepared. And again, I really truly believe it's practical. So, some of those little fears got a little bit stirred up. And then we talked a lot about the what ifs. Well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? What do we do? And what do we do if trees are down and you can't get your car out? So then you need this. And so it was a really interesting process to do. And where we are, we're 98% finished now. I think there's only a few things left on the list to get. Um, Christian needs an extra pair of pants that he doesn't have, and we want to put in some pain meds in case somebody got hurt. And I think there's not much else, and everything is ready. Oh, and now the chocolate's in. That needed to go in, and then it'll be put away, easy access. But now, when you look at the fear it brought up and everything, and just the process of going and buying and spending the money and everything, and but now there's no stress around it. Now, I mean, we work from home, so now I know that if something happened, we're prepared. We're really prepared. We could probably live a pretty good life with all the stuff we have in there, and we have enough food and stuff for 2 weeks. We have extra stuff. So we planned it as though, what if you couldn't get to a grocery store? What if, your bank cards don't work or your credit cards? What if, you know, ideally we would always stay at home because we have more here. We have a fireplace and a barbecue and all those things, but we're prepared. So one of the things I want to share is that it's like this stress just drops away and you don't think about it anymore. It's like, wow, this is done. I am ready. If the shit hits the fan, if something happens, we're okay. And I'm sure if something happened, we would say, "Oh, we forgot this." When you're living it, you think, "Oh, you never put this in in the emergency kit. Next time we need to add this." But we've gone through it an awful lot. So all of this process has got me thinking a lot. And it I started looking at it in terms of, someone said to me when I was saying we were getting our emergency kit ready, someone said, "But you're so protected. Why would you do that?" And I know I am. I completely trust my guides and my highest self and source, and I get warnings, and like we did last time, and I know that I'm protected. I know all of us are in some way, and I have the advantage that I can really hear my guides clearly, and we have an ongoing, constant relationship. But so I sort of sat down and I thought, okay, well, I'm really protected. And then, but then I thought, oh, but we're living in a 3D planet. Okay, maybe it's moving, the vibration's moving to 5, but I'm still in this human body. I still eat. I still need, to use toilet paper. I still want to have homeopathics when I get, not feeling well. And the guys came through and said, yes, there is often this gap where spiritual beings, people on their journey, are here and they feel so la or protected or, you know, working in the 5D, that there's this gap between the action and the reality. So for us, the 3D action was actually preparing the kit. And now we know, even though we know that we would probably be given some sort of warning, we know that we're prepared. And, so I ask you, what are you ignoring because of your spiritual life? Or what are you ignoring in your 3D? And I had a couple of other examples that maybe will resonate with you. Um, I know of someone who, is struggling financially. Okay. My sister did. And we sat down and we talked to her about getting a job, and we looked up jobs for her, and we talked about all kinds of different ways that she could generate a little bit of income. Okay. But she never did any of them. She never took the action. Right. And I was talking to someone the other day, and they are, like I said, having a little bit of financial difficulty. And I said to them, when was the last time you actually applied for a job? And it was more than a year ago. And so they've been doing huge spiritual work. They've been doing their clearing and releasing their blocks and looking at, what their beliefs are that limit them, which is really, really key. But on the other hand, you've got to take the action. It's like the story you hear that I've heard a long time ago uh, about a man, that God says, this is all just sort of a little joke, that God says you're going to be rich. You're going to win the lottery. You're going to be rich. And so this man is really excited. And he keeps being told he's going to win the lottery. And then he dies and he hasn't won the lottery. And he says to God, I didn't win the lottery. You kept telling me to win the lottery. And the saying goes that God says, well, why didn't you buy the lottery ticket? Right. Or it's people who tell me, I really want to meet the love of my life, but they don't want to go out anywhere, and they don't want to be on any dating websites, or they don't want to go to a new event. So you have to do 3D action, right? Another one that comes up a lot is there's a lot of people that do have healing, go to healing sessions, right? So they go and they pay to have sessions to have healing work done on them. But then they eat all kinds of sugar or the wrong food for their body, or they don't get much sleep, or they don't move their body. So there's all these contradictions, right? So on one hand, they're doing the energetic and the spiritual work about clearing their blockages and looking at how their life is, but then they don't do the action in the 3D. Does anybody have any other examples where you've seen people do the work in the energetics and on the etherics, and they're really dedicated to that, but it's not manifesting, it hasn't changed into the physical? So Uruk says, in my country, there's a saying, help yourself and then God will help you. Yeah, I like that one too. And it's, in the spiritual world, we can get caught up in all our beliefs and our wounds and our blockages and letting them go. And that is so important. And I would always tell people to do that. But you have to balance it with some action. So maybe you're clearing your beliefs, but then you have to start changing some actual behaviors that go along with it. Right? So, what are you ignoring? What do you think you're ignoring? Anybody brave enough to share? What do you think that you've missed that you need to take more action on? More action on. And if you have any questions, please just let me know. Yeah. All right. So let's do a short download. because I always like the chance to do a download for everybody. Great motivation to look at those things. And I would just say that emergency kits are good for all of us, whether you live on an island or not, whether you live in a city or, you should have a go bag, a bag that you can grab that has a few essentials for you if something happened, right? Everybody should have something like that. Okay, so download. I think I'm just going to do a download for 5 minutes, 5 minutes of the vibrations. If I can find, there it is, my phone. The vibrations of peace. Oh, and Christian says you can use your emergency kit to go camping. Yeah, we talked about it. We said, okay, well, maybe we'll just take it camping next year and see, did we really have enough, right? Did we really have enough? And we're going to try in the next week or so one of the dry food packages we bought to see how edible they are. But a friend of ours had some a couple of weeks ago when Christian was out hiking, and he said they were quite good. Um, Monica says, thank you. I feel the same way. I lived in the country, and this is so important. Yeah, it's so important. And it may be other things that, an emergency kit is really important, but, I was talking to another client today that is wanted to be prepared for when they pass, that it's easier for their adult children. And you can get these books on Amazon. I sent her a link to one that's called What to Do When I'm Dead or something. And you put in it all your passwords and your insurance policies and what you want for your funeral and all the questions that your family or your spouse might have when you're no longer here, right? That's another way of being prepared for the future, right? All right, let's do 5-minute download of the vibration of peace. So I'm going to ask everyone to close your eyes. And of course, you're not driving, okay? And I'll start that now and just see or feel as I start to bring in that vibration of peace. And just receive. And when you're prepared, it's so much easier to feel peaceful. There you go. Hopefully you felt that vibration of peace. Okay, so Cali girl, I have a lot of preparedness stuff in my house, but never thought to have it in one place to grab and go. Yeah, really important. The one place, easy access. Another thing that my guides told me last time is I was throwing when I was doing mine last time all these clothes I didn't like my old sweatpants and, all that kind of, wear when you're out working in the yard clothes. And they said, you know what? You're in a stressful situation. If you're out of your home, you want to at least have some things you like to wear, like some nice things in there. And they had me put in things like face cream and some things that made me feel more normal. So, yeah. So it was really kind of interesting to hear some of the things, and yeah. So, look at today's session is really about emergency kits as one part, but also tied into the what do you still need to take action on? It's one thing to, do your energetic work, but there needs to be some 3D action that goes along with it. Thanks for being here, everybody. I hope you never need your preparedness kit, but trust me, it sure takes the stress away. Have a good week and happy Thanksgiving to the Canadians. Bye for now.